For the first time in recent history, the global public has a more favorable view of China than the United States. This chart tracks data from the Pew Research Center's 2026 Spring Global Attitude Survey. Across a massive 37-country poll, China has managed to build a net positive global image, with 51% expressing a favorable opinion. Meanwhile, the U.S. is sitting on a net negative image, with 57% of respondents expressing an unfavorable view. To see exactly how this happened, we have to look at the geographic breakdown. Favorable views of the U.S. dropped in literally every country surveyed where data from last year is available, with the single exception of Mexico. China, on the other hand, is surging in popularity across South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. This collapse in American appeal is driven by a decade of foreign policy whiplashing, with every change in the White House. The current administration is highly polarizing abroad, with only 23% of respondents globally expressing confidence in Donald Trump, driving severe declines in confidence across high-income allied nations. The administration's response to this polling deficit is to essentially argue that being liked doesn't matter. The new strategy is to actively discard the need for soft power, global appeal, and diplomatic goodwill, and rely entirely on immense hard power, leveraging tariffs and the threat of military action to force compliance. The United States is actively testing a dangerous geopolitical hypothesis: whether a modern superpower can maintain global supremacy entirely through fear and economic force. In a unipolar system, where one hegemon dictates the rules, hard power works flawlessly. Smaller nations have no options, so they fall in line. But the geopolitical landscape has shifted into a multipolar world. Smaller nations actually have options. This multipolarity neutralizes coercion. If Washington pushes a target country too hard with heavy tariffs or military threats, that country doesn't have to surrender. They can simply walk away and align themselves with a different major power. That alternative is China. Beijing has spent years aggressively branding itself as a reliable, non-interfering partner to nations feeling squeezed by the United States. And the polling data shows this alternative pitch is working. The rest of the world is now more likely to view China, rather than the U.S., as a contributor to global peace and stability. Sheer coercion loses its teeth when the target of your threats has a well-resourced alternative ready to take their calls. Advocates of hard power operate on a concept foreign policy experts call the realist assumption. This is the idea that smaller states will always rationally calculate their strategic leverage and back down when threatened by a much larger military or economy. We are watching a real-world test of this assumption right now in Brazil. Washington has threatened massive tariffs against Brazilian exports to force the country into giving better market access to American payment processors like Visa and MasterCard. If the realist assumption holds true, the Brazilian government should calculate that fighting a U.S. trade blockade would devastate their economy and promptly surrender. Instead, President Lula aggressively rejected the demands and came out swinging against the economic pressure. The realist assumption misses a crucial variable: governments answer to domestic voters, not pragmatic equations. Standing up to an international bully is incredibly popular, and Lula's polling numbers skyrocketed after he pushed back. This illustrates a fundamental tension for the American strategy. Because foreign leaders are often more responsive to domestic political incentives than international leverage, relying on hard power threats can backfire, providing a political rally point for the very leaders Washington is trying to coerce. This reveals the hidden structural value of soft power. Being viewed favorably acts as a geopolitical lubricant. It makes other nations naturally inclined to follow your lead by default, without requiring any threats at all. When you try to operate the global system without that lubricant, the friction is massive. Every single international negotiation requires you to issue an explicit display of force or hand out an exhausting economic bribe just to achieve basic policy objectives. Over time, this constant friction can push targeted countries to build alternative trade networks and financial systems that bypass the United States entirely. By forcing every interaction into a confrontation, Washington may inadvertently encourage its partners to permanently insulate their economies from American leverage. For the vast majority of post-war history, American global supremacy was built on wielding both hard and soft power simultaneously, allowing the U.S. to build massive, willing international coalitions. By willingly ceding its soft power advantage to China, The United States is running a massive geopolitical experiment. We are about to find out if being the toughest kid on the playground is enough to keep the playground from leaving you behind.